It was the Columbia River flooded. Vanport on the border between Washington and Oregon, a whole lot of people died. The city was lost. It's not there anymore. The city of 50,000 people just gone.
Mondays with Mike.
Mondays with Mike. Mondays with Mike.
Trump alcoholic personality.
Let's talk about, that very strange interview.
So there's this lady, Susie Wiles, White House Chief of Staff. NBC reported on her words as publicized in a Vanity Fair article. According to her, in this article, Trump operates with a view that there is nothing he can't do. She said that she thought that he had an alcoholic's personality. But the craziest part of this story to me was that Trump said that he agrees with her, saying of himself that he has a possessive and addictive personality type. And he said, "I'm fortunate I'm not a drinker." Sure, yeah, good job. Good job not drinking. Immediately, what I thought was, him saying, I have a possessive and addictive type personality. Is there some book that they're looking this up in? Oh, that personality matches me. Yeah, I'm an ENTJ. Yeah, I'm an addictive and possessive personality type. That would have been my first question. The same lady described J.D. Vance as a conspiracy theorist. But then Susie Wiles, asked separately about the interview, said it ignored the context in which she made these statements.
It's very Nixonian about Trump believing that he can do whatever he wants. Because that reminds me of the Frost-Nixon interview where Nixon effectively said, if the president does it, it's legal. I am the law. And actually, Trump did that in an executive order. He said that he and Bondi are the law early on in the second term. They actually released a statement to that effect, which is a little odd. The law is written by Congress, and the president faithfully ensures that the law is followed. The president isn't the law. It's a little, I know it seems esoteric, but I guess one way to think of it is the president's the custodian of our legal system, make sure that everything is followed faithfully through, is the guardian of our system of making sure that the laws are enforced. The president never generates those laws. That's the legislative branch. And then the Supreme Court interprets that of whether it's followed or not. But the addictive and possessive personality type, yeah, I can see it. He puts his name on everything he can. He owns an awful lot of things, right? He owns a plane, actually 2 planes, I guess. He owns a lot of golf courses. He spent a lot of money on buying stuff that reflects him. Do you remember when he bought that painting of himself? And if there's any number of other things where it's pretty obvious that if anything, I would say he's addicted to making money just for the sake of making money, because an awful lot of effort and time has been expended on Trump's part while in office generating money for himself. Look at the crypto stuff that happened when he had that meeting of all the crypto people in the White House, whereas, it's in his off time when he's not being president.
Off time.
Yeah, and it's like, what is that? But all this other stuff, Kamala Harris was giving an interview or she was responding to an interview where she was saying that when she called Trump during the campaign, she heard in the background Trump selling something. He's addicted to the constant making of me, to the constant self-promotion, the constant me. Look at all the Truth Social posts that he makes. It's just this constant, I don't know how to explain it, this constant need to be affirmed, to be told, yes, you're the best, you're the greatest, you're the most profound, you're the most exquisite, superb, experienced person. I look at it when he was pushing to get the Nobel Peace Prize and was so disappointed he didn't. And then FIFA was like, you know what, we're going to just pet that ego and we're going to give him our own FIFA Peace Prize.
A FIFA Peace Prize?
Yeah, they already did. They gave him that golden prize. It already happened. But it's
I missed that one.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy. The whole ceremony was just a little bizarre. But it's this thing where he needs to constantly be surrounded by sycophants. And if anything, right now, it seems his obsession is to get people to do his bidding in all sorts of strange ways to make sure that there's extreme immigration enforcement, that these boats keep getting struck off of the coast of Venezuela and the Caribbean and the Pacific. If there is an addiction that he has, it seems to be exercising power in extreme ways that resemble more like a Greek god than they do any down to earth human being.
Yeah.
Killing people in boats is Zeus hurling thunderbolts at people that piss him off, right? That's what I'm thinking of. Is some goat herd looked at the sky wrong and said, "I hate the clouds," and Zeus was like, "Aha, be gone, goat herd, lightning bolt," right? Or because if you look at the petition that happened of one of the families that lost someone in these strikes, they're going, "My husband was a fisherman, right? Not a drug runner, fisherman, old fisherman, guy who goes out on a boat and fishes for fish." Right?
Old Man in the Sea, dystopian 2025 version.
Exactly. Why did he die? Why are you killing fishermen? It's one of those things where if there is an addiction that he has, it's this constant exercise of power, right? This constant need to say, "I'm the best, I'm the greatest." So the most recent example I can think of is the Hall of Presidents, where they have all the portraits of the president, and he had to personally editorialize every president. Why why do we need to have his personal opinion on Biden, Obama, Andrew Jackson, Reagan? Why do we need to know? Why is it so imperative that we have to be, yeah, like, does he want to be a movie critic, a critic of the everything? Does he want to write all the history books? Does he want to? I guess he does, right? If he wants to run the Kennedy Art Center, he wants to choose who gets awarded the civic honors. It is a complete dissonance that it's the Trump Institute of Peace, as if ostensibly anything that Trump is doing right now is peaceful. I'm sorry, but bombing people in boats without putting them on trial or proving that they've actually committed any kind of crime that's a capital offense, right? That's not peaceful. That's chaos.
Yeah. So Trump has money and he's obsessed with making money. It raises for me a brief, maybe, philosophical question of how much is enough, and what's the deal? Like beyond it, you're beyond a certain amount, which is enough. You could just have a great life with your family. You don't have to constantly be negotiating with people. What's this need to keep making more money? How much is enough? What do you think?
Oh, there was a great doctoral dissertation I read called The Psychopathology of Wealth Accumulation, and that was arguing that it's actually like an addiction disorder, that after a certain level of wealth, these people are accumulating more wealth, more like a gambler or an alcoholic, in that they're not actually gaining the wealth to spend it. It's this sort of hierarchy thing. So there's this story that Trump's obsessed with the Forbes, is it top 400 or something, that the billionaires on Forbes, that he like wants to be on that list and always be higher up on the list. I believe it, right? It goes to this question. Look, probably the weirdest thing in the Susie Wiles interview was that Elon Musk was sleeping in a sleeping bag in one of the government buildings during the Doge thing, and this is the richest man on the planet sleeping in a sleeping bag. Is he so frugal that he won't even pony up the money to, I don't know, get a hotel room or rent a place to live? Is that not something that the wealthiest person in existence can do? It was a little bizarre, right? Like, that he was looking for the cheapest, least expensive option for staying in DC when he quite seriously has the most money of everyone on the planet. I didn't understand it. I don't get it. But if you think about it like a game of wealth accumulation, this need to squeeze as much money and value as you can from every aspect of life, then it makes perfect sense, right? If he could get away with sleeping in a field or something that cost him nothing, you take that option always. You take the option that costs no money entirely, so you can throw more money onto the dragon horde, right? Onto the big pile of money, like Smaug in the Lord of the Rings. Why does this dragon have so much stuff? What's the dragon doing with the stuff? It's just sitting on the pile of stuff. And anyone that tries to come and take the stuff is like mine. Sets them on fire. That's the kind of thing I think about when I think of these incredibly wealthy people who will never spend all this money in their whole lifetime. There's no way. And you think of just the extreme disparities in wealth, where you've got these very filthy rich people, and then you've got very poor people who have access to very little food, very little water, very little medicine, very few accommodations or shelter. And Bill Gates put it succinctly that when Elon Musk went in with the Doge effort and pretty much shut down US aid, it was the world's richest man killing the world's poorest people, right? When you take away the medicine from people who need it the most, when you stop the money for the AIDS program to treat AIDS in parts of the world that have a huge incidence of AIDS that kill populations, when you cut off the food for people suffering from malnutrition, those people starve, right? If they need medicine to live and they don't get it, they die. And so that's the whole issue is why did the world's richest person expend so much time and energy ensuring the world's poorest got even less, right? Does all the money have to funnel up to just one person? Is that really where we're at? And that's the problem, too, I think, with these blinders that Trump seems to have on, where he's just refusing to acknowledge that there is an affordability crisis, that the price of food is increasing. We're seeing it right now play out with this health insurance premium issue, where the insurance premiums are going to double for people, or they're going to triple, right? That's a lot of money. You're paying 500 a month, and then you have to pay 1,000 a month, or you have to pay 1,500 a month, or 2,000 a month. That's a lot more money. And insurance doesn't even guarantee that you have access to healthcare. All it guarantees is it's like a coupon, like a discount for accessing healthcare. Because for a lot of these plans, they still have to pay a deductible before the insurance ever even kicks in, or they have to, their insurance isn't necessarily covered in some places. So they have to go to whatever their in network person is. The point is, to the degree that I'm making a point, right now, Trump seems to be addicted to inflicting suffering on people through ICE and through these bombings of the boats and through the uncertainty of the immigration process right now. When they unilaterally cancel a visa process, when they stop all, at one point, they tried to stop all refugees from coming into the country for seeking asylum claims, all refugee admittances, and all the funding provided to refugees who arrive to the US. Right, so there's refugee resettlement programs that provide money to help people get settled into the US when they move here after fleeing from war and catastrophe and all that stuff. The Trump administration early on was trying to stop all that money from going to help people get settled here. And it's like, why? Is the cruelty the point? Is that the where we're at?
Yeah, seems very unfortunate. Avarice was in 4 times recognized as a disorder, so if it's at this point labeled a psychopathology, then it's at least worth considering. Because, and I think of The Gospel of Wealth by Andrew Carnegie, and I think that was probably a timely piece of information in the Gilded Age, because then the rich might have gotten richer, but at least you got like Carnegie Mellon University now. At least you got some other things. So if to some degree this super accumulation of wealth can be put to good public use, especially, that would be a good thing. Okay, really quick on Susie Wiles allegedly saying that Trump had an alcoholic's personality. It reminds me, and then Trump saying, oh, I agree with her. It reminds me of when Trump met Mayor-elect Mamdani. Mamdani was asked by reporters whether he still thought Trump was a fascist, and Trump quickly replied, just paraphrasing, he said something like, it's okay, you can just answer yes, it's easier that way. I'm wondering if Trump has, like, people he likes, and then he's okay with whatever they say, or whether he's playing some kind of give them the answer they don't expect game to confuse people's expectations. Any thoughts on that one?
Oh yeah, Trump surrounds himself with sycophants, right? He surrounds himself with people who will only agree with what he says and what he does. And so long as they're lavishing praise upon him and they're kissing the ring, constantly lauding him and cheering him on and saying, you're the best, you're the greatest, you're the most wonderful, you're amazing, he gives them a great deal of latitude to do whatever their job is, right? The main thing that he wants is loyalty. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's demanding competency. And we've seen this time and again. We saw this with Hegseth, where the Inspector General report comes out and says that Hegseth very much put the service U.S. military personnel at risk with the Signalgate thing. And Trump just like hand waves that away and goes, oh, no, the report exonerates. I trust Pete. It exonerates. And it's one of those things where we see this time and again with Trump in particular, where the first administration was a revolving door of cabinet officials, if you recall. A lot of people quit or got fired, just over. And towards the end of his first administration, he had a lot of acting heads of agencies because they didn't have time to Senate confirm those positions for the nominees because it was getting pretty ridiculous. In this term, we're not seeing that. What we're seeing is a lot more loyalty to the people who are. There is an exception. The guy who was the national security advisor got the boot and is now something else because of Signalgate, because of the journalists getting in on the signal chain. So we did see that, but time will tell. But so far, it looks like he does in fact surround himself still, and even more so for this administration, with sycophants, with people who just constantly lavish praise on him. Not like a sometimes thing, just constant. Do you ever hear his cabinet meetings where they're always like, "You're the greatest, you're the best. I'm so happy to be part of your movement. You're the most wonderful and perfect being to ever walk this earth." Right? That everything you touch turns to gold and beauty and greatness. If you spend any amount of time listening to these when he's not sleeping, right, when he's not taking a nap, they're just lavishing praise on him. They're saying it's the very best, the very greatest, nothing's quite like it. That's one way of governing, but we've seen the downside of that, which is that you get people like Comey who don't praise him to his face and say, "No, I'm not going to declare my undying loyalty to you. I'll give you my honest assessment of the situation and do my job." But there's a separation of FBI director and president because the FBI director sensibly is supposed to have independence to prosecute members of the administration if they have to. Look at what happened with Watergate, with all the people getting fired in the Department of Justice. There was a criminal investigation, or even the Iran-Contra scandal. There was a criminal investigation of Iran-Contra of the administration, such that you have to have sort of this wall built between the FBI director and the attorney general and the president in this administration, especially with this release of the Epstein files. We're not seeing that at all. We're seeing what looks like a cover-up. If those stories are true, that they had 1,000 FBI agents combing through the files to essentially find every mention of Trump, getting paid thousands of dollars in overtime to do it, that sounds an awful lot in effort to keep something hidden. It all goes back to the sycophancy thing, that as long as they're praising Trump, he lets them get away with quite a lot. That's just how it's going. One example is the Kristi Noem thing with the ad agency. They've been directed millions of dollars to do ads for ICE and Homeland Security, where Kristi Noem features prominently in all these different commercials and ads, dressed in various costumes. And it smells of self-dealing. It's the same group from when she was governor. It doesn't look good. Let's put it that way. That no-bid contract.
When we started this podcast, I had this idea because I had been watching NBC News with my wife. I just noticed a lot of buzzwords that they repeated frequently, and I thought, if you can track their behavior in certain ways, is the truth really getting through? But it took a story with which I had a lot of personal information for me to be able to point this out. So, in Washington, where we live, there were some floods in this last 2 weeks.
This was in mid-December, approximately the 10th through the 17th.
They were pretty bad. We had such floods in 08, 09, and those weren't as bad as these. I don't know how far you have to go back to get as bad of floods as you got in western Washington just this last 2 weeks. That said, one person total died as a result of them. And frankly, he died from driving on a road that was closed. Not to diminish a death. It's a terrible thing. But it's not like the floods came and overwhelmed his house and he was carried away with the waters. That's not what happened. So, yes, it was a big mess, but was it a terrible disaster in terms of lives? No. The answer is no. We can say that. Even one life is too many, by comparison to a lot of other things. So NBC, in the report that I will link, had various statements that I found to be of dubious nature. I'll read a few of them. One of them I believe it was Tom Yamas. He said, that historic flooding that has turned deadly. That seems to imply that the flood comes and pushes over your house and you die in the flood. Somebody who drives into the water, is the flooding deadly? You might say. But it's precisely the minimal amount of deadly you could have in order to say that, which is not what people think. If they're going to watch the national news and they say, the flooding is turning deadly, it's not what you think.
You asked when the worst floods were. That would be 1948, the Danforth, Oregon flood on the border between Washington and Oregon killed 37 people and washed away the city of Vanport. Goodbye, Vanport.
Yeah, I've never even heard of that city.
Yeah, it was the Columbia River flooded. Vanport was built in the Columbia Basin, so it was reclaimed lowlands. The city was built in an area that would face devastating damage from a flood, and lo and behold, flood happened and a whole lot of people died. 37 people died, which is a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Other reports put the number dead at 15. Either way, it was a major tragedy. The entire city was lost.
City was lost. It's not there anymore. There's no more city, and it was a city of 50,000 people. So, just gone. It got washed away.
Yeah, very worthy of note. However, also in the Portland area as opposed to the Seattle area.
Yes, it was the Pacific Northwest because it was on the border between Washington and Oregon on the Columbia River. The whole point is that there have been floods that were devastating. These floods are definitely devastating, just not as devastating.
Deadly to the tune of one life so far. Yeah. Then he said, and this might have been the reporter, this might have been Steve, they said, a levee breaching with more rain on the way. Second clause, there's always more rain on the way. There's always going to be another flood. He did actually mean there was some weather system of some concern. But just to point out, more rain on the way is essentially a tautology. It does not represent the severity of the rain. Even though he's standing in a flooded parking lot, it might be seen to imply that. And he said, Steve, flooding's still a major threat there. Again, yes, by comparison, but here's the deal. The real rains came in between, December 10th and the 12th. I was driving to work in the morning, and it was heavy rain the entire time for a relatively long commute. That was the most severe rain, and you could just tell in the forecast that the rain that was coming was not at all going to be that severe. Yes, the waters were already high, but if you actually look at the breach that they reported on in a previous story, it was a breach, okay, the road caves in for a span of about 10 feet. And it was because they were watching it carefully, and they were able to repair it quickly. But those are the two breaches it said. There was another thing, too. They said the National Guard going door to wake up people. Yeah, at 1:30 in the morning. That actually, I noted, was underreporting. That might also have been true. But had they investigated it carefully, I believe they would have known and said they had helicopters over people's houses, shouting at them from megaphones. I don't know what they were shouting, but waking them up from megaphones. So the fact that would have been more sensational and they didn't report it leads me to believe it was, okay, we know approximately what happened here. We can generate this script with these tautologies. So, again, I'm just one guy reading a story here and thinking, oh, that's not quite right, oh, that's wrong. And then the last thing which I will read here, this one really gives it away. The meteorologist that Tom Yamas was talking to said that 2 to 4 inches of rain was possible, with 8 inches not out of the question in some places. He was showing a map of the entire upper half of the West Coast. We're talking about 2, 3, 4, 5 counties in here in Washington, but the heaviest water was in central southern Oregon, northern California. It's there's 8 inches, could be 8 inches. The heavy rain was not in the area that they were talking about. This is just sloppy. If people see the media blow things out of proportions on topics with which they are familiar, will they then believe the media when they talk about other topics that they're not familiar with? And do we live in a culture of crying wolf as far as the people with megaphones go?
Oh, this is a success story for early warning systems. So the fact that there was only one death and that there were
Yeah.
mandatory evacuation orders, it's night and day between what happened here and what happened in Texas earlier in the year. In Texas, the warning was too late. The person who was supposed to communicate late at night between the government officials and the meteorologists had been like fired, resigned, or let go. Or there was some situation where the person who was supposed to do a job and inform everybody wasn't there, and so they got the information late. Clearly, Washington State has invested an awful lot of money in levees, warning systems, and communication systems because we heard about it over and over and over again. People got notifications on their phones, they got it on the media, the news was covering it. But you see this huge difference in response between what happened in Texas and what happened here. I've been listening to a bunch of the press conferences with Ferguson, and what Ferguson keeps saying is, look, I need the media to just keep talking about this and reporting on this because I think it is saving lives. And so in this circumstance, sure, they may be making it bigger in some ways than it seems or is in certain areas. But the point is that the message is getting heard by an awful lot of people when the media is covering this. And the media covers it in the way it does to make money, right? If it bleeds, it leads. They're looking for the most devastating, the most waterlogged, flooded, destroyed areas to cover and put on TV because people watch catastrophe, they watch disaster, right? They follow these horrible circumstances and situations and go, well, at least it's not me and it's not happening here. That's part of it, but it's also functions as a warning system to everybody to create urgency. Look, I know this seems strange, but if they saved even one life with the reporting, I'm not that concerned that the reporting's a little over the top because it is absolutely true that in certain parts of Washington, houses were washed away, roads were flooded. If you listen to the descriptions, the discussions of what's been happening in all these different counties, parts of the highway have washed away with mudslides and landslides. They're going to have to rebuild the roads. Is the situation the worst it could ever be? No. A city hasn't been washed away. The worst hurricane in history was in 1780, killed 22,000 people. That was bad. This is not that. This is just a lot of rain. What I do think, actually, what would be really awesome is if they came up for when there's so much rain, some kind of rain catchment system. Instead of having all this flooding, figure out a system of aqueducts, dikes, reservoirs, and just get all that water and funnel it into one big pool and pipe it down to whoever needs it. If you want to talk about something Trump could actually do to make meaningfully improve the lives of people, refill the reservoir down in California when they emptied it to put out the fire. I remember when that happened, where they emptied their water reserve when they didn't have to, when they were getting water from lakes in the ocean to put out the fire and maybe replenish that. There's any number of things that could be done that would help meaningfully improve the lives of everyone. But no, the way that they cover floods it's just dramatic. But this goes back to our discussion, though, about the importance of electing officials that care about government actually functioning, because a lot of the flooding was kept contained by the levees due to huge investments, huge infrastructure investments that happened years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where they looked at the projections of possible flooding and say, okay, look at what happened in Mount Vernon. They had a seawall that's withstood the flooding, right? The water went up and it didn't go over. There you go. That's what you need. And in the places where it wasn't maintained as well, the levee broke and there was some flooding. That sucks. But no, I get what you're saying, that they're not adequately covering certain parts and they're using images, information from other areas and making it seem like it's as bad in an area when it's not. And that's just to make the story seem bigger than it is. If you create this level of exaggeration and hyperbole, it draws more viewers. I think we talked about this in an earlier podcast, why they cover all these extreme weather events. It's to make the news seem more relevant, to seem more important and prominent in people's lives, to make them fear the elements and to turn to the news in their time of need because they'll feel that the news is providing them vital and important information in a timely manner.
Yeah, they want people to say, the news saved my life. And in some cases, it actually can.
It does, absolutely. But also, they're a business, right? They have to make money. And the way you make money is that you make everything seem like a disaster movie.
Cool. Think that there's another element at work here where people end up not exactly trusting the news because of this constant turn it up to 11. But what exactly is the solution here? I guess when people get to that level, probably engage more with print media and other, like, lower octane versions.
Look, the problem with print media is it happens after the fact. The benefit of TV news and live coverage is that it's covering it in real time, right? The images that they're showing are of somewhere where flooding is happening, somewhere in this country. Sure, they may be focusing on one story in one area, but they're still also talking about a much bigger story elsewhere. That the flooding is affecting a lot of people in a lot of ways, and that people need to seriously consider listening to the authorities when they say get out, when they have the must go evacuation orders. It's not an exaggeration. It's not a you can weather this storm. It's a leave now, right? Get out, find higher ground, go somewhere else, right? It reminds me of if you've ever seen Deep Impact or Armageddon. Deep Impact's the one I think of, where giant asteroids heading to the planet and everybody has to go to higher ground because a huge tidal wave is going to go all the way inland to the Rocky Mountains, like a huge tidal wave, and so everybody has to get to higher ground. Period. Or the day after tomorrow, when the whole country turns to ice, the northern part of the country, and everybody has to evacuate. It's one of those things where you need the media to show these images live. Katrina is a good example. I was looking at the death toll from Katrina. Almost 1,400 people died from Katrina. That was a profound failure of response, that they weren't adequately prepared for evacuation, for the supplies, for making sure that everybody had adequate transportation out of the city, that the levees weren't built strong enough because the levees broke. Something really bad happened in Hurricane Katrina. Catastrophic system failure occurred. A lot of people died. A lot of people suffered. If you want to watch a good show for that, watch 5 Days at Memorial, about Memorial Hospital in New Orleans, where they had patients stuck in, couldn't get treatment, really bad. Terminally ill patients couldn't get access to medicine and supplies, and they ran out of electricity, right? People who are hooked up to ventilators and machines. What do you do? What do you do? That goes back to talking about how if we teach people how to have amphibious cars or how to convert their cars to become amphibious, that wouldn't have happened. They would have just floated away. They'd drive into the water and float away, float through it. It's the fact that they drove into the water and then the water sank their car pretty much, that they couldn't get out, that they essentially were submerged in the water and died. That's tragic. There are ways around it. But also, for that particular story, I think I need to word this delicately. It's not enough sometimes to put up a sign that a road's closed. Sometimes we need ways to erect barricades, to put up like an actual wall. So think of a toll booth, right, where they have a barrier entering a road. If the U.S. had some way, some mechanism to press a switch if a road's compromised and say, nope, just put up like a physical wall, even if it's just like a stupid plastic wall, right? Something really cheap, paper. It doesn't matter. Something that's durable and that a cardboard, something that will block the road in a physical way, because then people are deterred from driving into the physical barrier. It's when they see a road in front of them and think, oh, the road's clear to drive on. No, it's not, right? If the road's submerged, it's no longer a road you can travel on, right? I do think there needs to be more effort. Maybe it's just because the U.S. is so big, right, that there's so many roads and there's so many things that could happen. But for something like this, where again it's in a floodplain or it's an area that could be flooded or could be covered in water, there just needs to be better ways to prevent people from traversing them. It's not like the technology doesn't exist. It's just that it costs money, time, and effort, and you have to hire someone to do it. Heaven forbid more people get jobs. Oh no, more people working.
I actually saw some roadways blocked off this week, even in places I wouldn't expect, even in places on hills, by a cop car with its lights on, and it's like, oh, I really can't drive there, and I wouldn't have thought that there would have been anything there. Even on the hillside, I saw certain fields flooded. I was like, oh, I guess that hillside didn't have sufficient drainage to the area below, and now we know. When there's water in certain places, it doesn't only pool together in the places you would expect,
There is a way to deal with this, to not have roadways submerged in water, and it's you create ditches, right? You dig holes on literally all the sides of these roads. Anywhere that there can be a ditch dug for water drainage, you dig it. You dig a hole. You dig a moat. You create a sort of a way for the water to flow so it doesn't even reach the road. If the road's elevated in any way such that water can't reach it, then you don't even need a barricade. You just have elevated roads, right? There are parts of the US where there are ditches on the sides of roads. Actually, there are places I've been to when I went on a road trip across the US where they dealt with extreme weather in creative ways. So in Wyoming, they have these huge walls for the heavy winds that occur so that they don't knock over the trucks and the cars. I don't know if you've ever seen that. They've got these really big windbreakers. Why can't we have similar things like a flood breaker? We've got dams. Why can't we have similar things for all the roads?
Yeah, in Wyoming they have barriers that go down. The freeway gets closed sometimes, and I think a freeway closed.
Oh
If
yeah.
there's a blizzard, they don't want to. They don't want to go there.
Oh yeah. No, and the wind gets really bad. It's just a whole thing. But if they can do that there, I'm trying to understand the impediment of, is it just a money thing? Just that there's so much road, or that it's like political stagnation or something, that it's just not occurring to them that for any road that could be flooded, there should be ditches, there should be adequate drainage, clear waterways so that the water goes into aquifers, like all the things that would make it so that the water never actually gets to the road. Because the whole problem here is that the water crested up the river or whatever, and then it went onto the road, or that there was so much water that it didn't move fast enough that it drained as it normally would. So the way you get around that is you create really big holes on the sides of the roads, or you create aqueducts and you physically ensure that the water just doesn't get into the road. Maybe that's just an expense thing, right? Because I know California has giant aqueducts. If you've ever been to California, they've got huge concrete aqueducts. The Romans had them.
Mondays with Mike.